They're not going to change their mind. They're not going to lay down their weapons. They're not going to go, oh, we did want to kill every single Jewish person and destroy the state of Israel, but oh, now we see the error of our ways. They're not going to change their minds. This isn't going to make a blind bit of difference. They're Islamic jihadist lunatics. The only answer to that, I'm afraid, is for them all to be dead.
Fine, and I don't disagree with any of that. You then have to ask yourself what replaces Hamas. And I go back to the point, what is the Netanyahu, not Israeli, because you've actually got military personnel distancing themselves from the war that's unfolding here, because it's absent of converting those battlefield successes into any form of strategy. Hamas is actually on the back foot, as is Iran. There is an opportunity to move this forward, but we see no plan whatsoever. And potentially recognition, it is symbolic, you're right, could help reverse this current trajectory. But you and I will agree, Hamas has no right to participate in the long-term governance of Gaza. And if you speak, as I've done, I was in touch with some of the Arab ambassadors this morning, they 100% agree with that.
But it doesn't matter. But so what? So what? They don't have a right. They've not been. They were elected in 2005 or whatever it was, 2006. They've not had an election since. But who does have a right? Oh, the Palestinian Authority. Oh, well, they haven't held an election for 20 years either. We call them the moderates. They're not moderate by any Western notion of They're not the liberal sodding Democrats. They are an extremist Islamo-fascist organisation as well. They're just not quite as extreme as Hamas.
So you then go back a step and say, what would be the technocratic setup that could be brought in by those Abrahamic Accord signatories that could actually help the Palestinians, ordinary Palestinians, the 2 million people that do not want any truck with Hamas themselves, knowing where this is taken.
How do you know that? Because on October the 7th, when young women bleeding, having blood all over them, with with broken limbs or some even dead, when they were being paraded on trucks through the streets of Gaza, ordinary, innocent civilian Palestinians, men, women, children, were happily shouting, spitting on them, cheering with joy at what happened. We saw the celebrations. Now, I'm quite happy to accept that not everybody in Gaza feels that way, but given the propaganda they are taught in their schools, given the attitudes that they are being raised with, there is no reason to believe that these people are not, as a majority, in favour of Hamas, their rulers.
I don't think you can speak for the 2 million people.
But neither can you. Well, you just did.
I just said that.
But you just said that you thought, the 2 million people who don't support, ordinary civilians. We don't know how many of them are sane and ordinary people who don't want to kill every Jew they get an opportunity to kill.
Let's keep this conversation going in the direction that can be helpful, because you can't speak for them and neither can I. What I can say, though, is that there isn't an alternative right now from other than Hamas, because it's not presented to the Palestinian people. At the moment, all they see is more war. The region simply sees more war. And the bigger question for us and the international community is to say, is the current strategy taking us to that two-state solution, which you, I think, started off by saying, yes, you want to see?
No, I don't know. No, I'm not entirely sure a two-state solution is even an option. The two-state solution has been offered again and again. It has been rejected every single time. The bodies that actually represent the Palestinian people or claim to, none of them actually support a two-state solution. What they want is a one-state solution, and that one state is annihilating Israel and taking Israel's land. That's not an option.
Look where that takes us.
Well, I know.
Your view is not the position of the British government. Indeed, is not the view of even the Americans.
But good luck with that.
The official position has been for many, many years, but we've not got there. And as I say, that
why haven't we got there?
That window is closing of a two-state solution, and it's closing for a number of reasons. But one of them, I have to say, is down to Prime Minister Netanyahu himself, that does not want to pursue this because he realizes, for many reasons which are actual personal, that more war suits him. Now, I simply say, for the moment, Hamas is actually on the back foot. There is nothing else is being currently offered to the Palestinian people as something as an alternative. You've got rich countries, Arab countries, wanting to move this forward, wanting stability itself. So to move this forward, you have to ask yourself, can we craft a more cognitive strategy rather than just the status quo, which I think is what you're currently arguing for, which will lead Iran to continue funding Hamas in this way?
No, I don't want the status quo. I want Israel. No, I want Israel. I want the only democratic state in the Middle East to win over the terrorists. I'd be perfectly happy with it. It's not my land. I'd be perfectly happy if they could negotiate a two-state solution. But I think it's a perfectly, and I accept your point that Netanyahu wants to stay in power. War suits him in terms of his own political situation and the corruption charges.
I'm glad you said that, because it's important to say.
I'm not a mouthpiece for the Israeli government. I never have been. However, Netanyahu is someone who's also, like every young Israeli in their youth, fought in the military, and he understands the reality that if you do set up a Palestinian state on Israel's border, a Palestinian state that is committed to the annihilation of Israel, is not in Israel's interest. And we wouldn't agree. If we were in the same circumstance, we would be insane to agree to that as well. When you say we should offer an alternative to the people of Gaza.
You're putting a false argument down, I'm afraid, which is the fact that somehow we are assuming that because this discussion of a two-state solution has come up, as I say, something perhaps to jolt, to nudge a focus on where we should be going, it's somehow inherent that Hamas will stay in power. Now, you sort of implied that that's what the Prime Minister wants as well. I absolutely distanced myself from the very start. When we had the debate in Parliament, I was one of the very first that said actions on the 7th of October remove Hamas's any right.
They never had a right to be in power. That wasn't the first act of terrorism they'd carried out.
No, but you yourself said that they were elected into power. What I'm trying to say is, where is the strategy to craft a more secular governance? With the support of
Tobias,
Arab nations. That's where the money will come from. Maybe
if Qatar stopped,
want to then support that.
Yeah, maybe if Qatar stopped letting the leaders of Hamas live, in their beautiful, billionaire mansions, then perhaps that actually put some pressure on them. That'd be good. But we have seen, haven't we not, some leading Middle East nations like Saudi and others actually speaking out and calling on Hamas to down weapons.
Exactly, which is why Hamas cannot participate in any governance in the future.
Okay.
And you need to leverage that.
Yeah, but here's the thing, Tobias. Tobias, if you think
Saudi is asking for as well.
You're an ex-military man. You know as well as I do. Hamas as a terrorist organisation are not going to go, oh, well, in that case, no one likes us anymore. I think we'll give up our weapons. The only reason why Hamas will vacate the Gaza and stop having the power they have will be when they are destroyed by the Israelis. They are doing a service for the entire region and the Palestinian people and the West in destroying Hamas. And they need to get every last Hamas
Please let me get a word in edgeways. Please let me get a word in edgeways to finesse what you are saying, because you cannot defeat an ideology by military means alone. And until we figure that out, then all the bombs that drop on Gaza, causing it to be absolutely destroyed, will not defeat
Why did we fire
ideology.
ISIS? Why did we fire ISIS? Why did we bother? Why didn't we just leave them?
No, you're missing my point.
I'm not missing your point.
My point is that you need a political strategy. Did we not learn anything in Northern Ireland or Afghanistan or indeed with Hezbollah? When were they created? Decades ago, after Israel invaded Lebanon, and they still exist today.
Do you know why? Do you know why we have peace in Northern Ireland, Tobias? We have peace in Northern Ireland because the Americans stopped funding the IRA.
You're making my case for me. A political solution, which meant that the IRA became unpopular because the people of Northern Ireland wanted peace.
The people of Northern Ireland have not been radicalised in the same way the people of Gaza have been radicalised.
The insurgency will continue unless the majority of people say, I don't want to support it. And that's the same the world over when you're dealing with an ideology. And at the moment, this is, I hope we can agree on, this is what Netanyahu has no interest in doing whatsoever.
No, I think
Absolutely not.
Netanyahu, he's got his own personal interests. I completely accept all of those. I've made that point. However, the Israeli government as a whole has an interest in protecting the Israeli people, the state of Israel. They're in an existential battle, and Hamas need to be destroyed. And any government policy that doesn't involve not just the ousting of Hamas, but the just complete destruction of Hamas isn't paying attention to the real world.
So what you and I are actually saying is actually not too far apart.
I think it is.
The difference is that, well, if I can finish my sentence, the difference is to do with the political approach, the strategy that then yields, that it takes advantage of your military successes on the battlefield and takes it a step forward. And the concern I have is when you may not argue, but many people have, including all sides in Parliament, that we want a two-state solution. The window for a two-state solution is closing. It's closing because what's going on with illegal settlements in the West Bank, and it's closing because of what's happening in Gaza at the moment. And if we are serious about a two-state solution, which you've now declared that you're not interested in, then that's what we need to rekindle, a sense of purpose as to where all this leads. And at the moment, I do not see a strategy. In relation to what you want to do, which is the status quo, that will lead to
Tobias, you're completely mischaracterizing what I've said. I'm all in favour of a two-state solution.
You said you were against a two-state solution.
No, I didn't. I've said no. I'm perfectly in favour of there being a two-state solution.
Okay, forgive me. That's what I understood.
If the Palestinian authorities, anyone who's involved in claiming authority over the Palestinian people and likely to claim authority over a Palestinian state such as it could ever exist, I don't think it'll happen in my lifetime. If they renounce the destruction of Israel and the murder of the mass extermination of Jewish people, which I'm not seeing coming, but I think that should be a prerequisite of being allowed to have a state. I think that would be a bare minimum request, no?
Well, I don't disagree with any of that. The trouble is,
well, then it's not going to happen.
Now repeated 3 times, is that you've got a prime minister that is deliberately moving the agenda the other way to close down even any option of having a two-state solution. That is why I have then said, let's use the card now to reaffirm what our long-term objective is. What we are not spending any discussion on is what would be the actual technocratic capability to run Gaza. And for me, that is a technocratic organization made up by skill sets that are brought in from Egypt, Jordan, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. That would be plausible to the Palestinians. I hope it would be acceptable to Israel. We're not even discussing that. Let's give the Palestinians another option rather than Hamas. And I would agree with you, Fatah in the West Bank as well.
The Palestinian authorities, whether it's Fatah, Palestinian authorities, whether it's Hamas or any others, have no interest in a Palestinian state, helping the Palestinian people, preventing loss of life of Palestinian children. They have no interest in any of that. They have no interest in peace. They have no interest in a two-state solution. The only thing they're interested in is carrying on their mafia, organised, criminal, Islamo-fascist battle against the people of Israel, against Jewish people and against Western civilization. And until our politicians get to grips with what we're dealing with there and the fact that large swathes of the Middle East, the countries have actually been backing them and cheering them on and funding them, not just Iran, Qatar and the others as well. Until they get to grips with that, we're not going to be able to deal with this in the real world. I think you're all living in a fantasy land, frankly.
Well, look at Gaza today. It's been carved up by the Israeli Defense Forces because of what they're doing to try and prosecute Hamas. And they could easily now take sections of that and start, and after actually checking the populations for whether their membership of Hamas, they've all got ID cards now anyway. You could begin the rebuilding programs today in communities. You could zone off Gaza into areas and start rebuilding it where there's a technocratic governance in charge, creating that stability, showing Palestinians that there is something beyond the war that they're currently looking at. We're not even considering that.
I'd love it if we could do that.
Come in and invest huge sums of money. Instead, we're just making it into one humanitarian disaster right now. That seems to be the current strategy. So these are practical solutions that we could lean into, which are beyond the general debate about whether or not to actually recognize Palestine or not. And we're not having that deeper conversations. As I say, the Arab states are ready to help. But Israel won't even let anybody in there, let alone take an area of southern Gaza, for example, and say, here, build communities, build a stand-alone community that can look after itself.
Yeah, well,
with responsibility given to the Arab states.
Well,
that
again,
would be my advance forward.
Wouldn't that be great?
I
believe 20 years ago they left them to their own devices, and we know what they did. And we've got a lovely network of tunnels. They could have had a London Underground, but chose not to.